In Norse society, sex was not taboo in the way it later became under Christian Europe. It was open, direct, and often public in speech. In the sagas, sexual jokes, insults, and boasts were part of everyday conversation. A man's honor wasn't judged by chastity, but by strength, dominance, and reputation. Unlike in medieval Christian Europe, where virginity was prized, the Vikings valued sexual conquest. Marriages were often arranged for alliances, but extramarital affairs were not uncommon, and sexual dominance over enemies was sometimes seen as an extension of battlefield victory. But when the longships left home, a darker side emerged, one that blended warfare, humiliation, and desire into a single, brutal practice. Part 2. The Ritual of Fear. Medieval chronicles, such as those written by monks in Britain and Francia, describe villages struck by what they called Viking terror. Part of this fear was physical, the burning of homes, the slaughter of defenders. But another part was sexualized violence, which the Vikings sometimes used as a weapon of intimidation. For some chieftains, the taking of captives, especially women, was not just a spoil of war, but a public performance of dominance. In a few recorded instances, they carried out humiliating acts in front of surviving villagers to crush morale. These acts were designed not merely for personal pleasure, but to send a message: we own you, we can take what we want. Part 3. Sex slavery and the thralls. The Vikings were among the most active slave traders of the early medieval world. Their captives were called thralls, and while many worked in fields or households, a portion were kept for sexual purposes. Women taken from Ireland, the Frankish coast, or Slavic lands could find themselves in a chieftain's hall, given as gifts to loyal warriors, or sold in bustling markets from Dublin to Constantinople. In Norse law, thralls had no rights over their own bodies. A master could use them or trade them at will. The sagas even mention female thralls given to entertain guests at feasts, an unthinkable act in Christian lands at the time. Part 4. The taking as a warrior's privilege. In the chaos of a raid, Viking warriors sometimes claimed the right to take sexual spoils immediately after victory. While not universal among all raiders, this practice is described in some Arabic and Frankish accounts, where survivors testified to attacks that included public assaults before captives were marched to the ships. Some Norse warbands even treated this as a ritual of victory, though the sagas rarely speak of it directly, possibly because such acts were considered shameful in peacetime, even if they were tolerated in war. Part 5. Shock in the Christian world. When news of these practices reached Christian chroniclers, they painted the Vikings as agents of hell. Monks wrote that the Northmen were possessed of unclean lusts and beasts without shame. One Frankish source tells of a coastal abbey where nuns were dragged from the altar, stripped, and defiled before the eyes of God. Whether this account was literal truth or exaggerated propaganda, it became part of the enduring image of Vikings as sexual predators as well as warriors. Part 6. Exotic Practices and the East. The Vikings who traveled east, the Varangians, encountered new sexual customs in Slavic and Byzantine lands. In some cases, they adopted and adapted these. Arabic writers like Ibn Fadlan described Norsemen who openly engaged in sexual acts on their ships, in full view of others, as if privacy was meaningless. Some even engaged in ritual couplings as part of funeral rites, an act that horrified Muslim and Christian observers alike. In one famous account, the funeral of a Viking chieftain included the sacrifice of a slave girl, who, before her death, was made to have sex with several men as part of the ceremony, a blend of brutality, religion, and sexuality that has few parallels in history. Part 7. The Line Between History and Legend. It is worth remembering that much of what we know about Viking sexual practices comes from their enemies, people who had every reason to make them seem as monstrous as possible. Still, archaeology confirms the widespread taking of female captives, and DNA evidence shows Norse genetic traces scattered far beyond Scandinavia, not just from trade and settlement, but from forced unions. Whether seen as warriors of unmatched courage or predators of the seas, the Vikings' sexual customs remain one of the most disturbing aspects of their legacy. Closing scene. The longship fades. As the longships pull away from the smoking coast, the cries of the captives are lost in the sound of the waves. For the Vikings, this was another victory, another village plundered, another story for the skalds to sing. For their victims, it was the day the sea itself became a monster.